Northrop Grumman, we've been developing new ways to execute the mission. What once was seen now stays undetected. Where alarms were once raised, now there's silence. With our full spectrum cyber capabilities, our military can eliminate enemy threats at the push of a button. That's the value of performance. Northrop Grumman.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me
Northrop Grumman, we've been developing
in welcoming Lieutenant General Bob Wood, U.S. Army retired Executive Vice President, AFCEA International.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead and come on in, find a seat. I want to make sure we start on the mark because we have a great presentation, a great presenter here this afternoon, and I want to make sure we have all the time we can get off his busy schedule, but also some from Q&A at the end. Reminder that AFCEA TechNet Augusta, AFCEA@gmail.com is our question post. So as you listen to the presentations and you have a question, go ahead and ask that question, and we'll get them asked to General Fogarty at the end. We're very, very happy to have General Fogarty with us today as our keynote speaker. What a great morning we had with the presentation. General Martin and his kind of setting the stage and describing a very busy Army, a very busy TRADOC. But really the challenge is the inflection point that he talked about that we've seen happen a number of times, whether it be coming out of World War II, coming out of Vietnam, coming out of Desert Storm, you name it. It's been this inflection point, and his emphasis being on not synchronization, test question, it's integration. All right, they got it right. It's really a great prelude to what we're going to hear this afternoon from a great soldier, a great commander, General Fogarty, Commanding General, U.S. Army Cyber Command. Not a stranger to us here at Fort Gordon, not a stranger to our Army. Has been in a variety of very tough, demanding jobs, done a wonderful job across the board from intelligence through cyber to cybercom, and is with us now as the commander of our cyber. He is right now, I should say, after being Chief of Staff at Cybercom. As many of you know, as a former Commanding General of the Cyber Center of Excellence in Fort Gordon, he was here about 3 years ago. It was about 3 years ago, and kind of cast a vision on how the Cyber Center of Excellence was going to do its job. And certainly talked about integration. Admiral Rogers always talked about cyber as a team sport. And to see General Fogarty, now General Morrison, take that to heart and put the variety of activities together. It came to me most 2 weeks ago. We were at the Army Cyber Ball, and General Fogarty was there as speaker, commander, and it was so funny. He said, all right, I need all the fire supporters stand. I need all the infantry stand. I need all the electronic warfare people stand. All the tribes. He was uniting the tribes in the Army cyber endeavor. Of course, when he said, and all you Space Force guys stand, everybody kind of stopped for a minute. They didn't know what the heck to do. But it was such a visual representation of the variety of skills and capabilities that are coming together in an integrated way to really promote this notion of cyber capabilities and to accomplish the missions that are being provided and day-to-day by the threat, but also by the capabilities we're bringing to bear that we can add to the toolbox for our cyber warriors. So, yeah, a great event, Thank you for the invitation, sir. We are happy to welcome this teammate. I would call him teammate, team builder, team leader to the stage. We put some whiteboards up here because last time he was up here, he covered them with, people were taking pictures of that whiteboard. So you can leave it white, it doesn't matter. I just was trying to stay ahead of you if I could. We first met that at Fort Gordon. The theme then was convergence. The theme was convergence that he addressed last time. You think about it, EW, cyber, intelligence, signal. It's really this community here at Fort Gordon, so special. These skill sets that are coming together to support our soldiers. Ladies and gentlemen, without me yapping much more, I'm going to give them time to answer questions. Please welcome to the stage, or the walk around, I'm not sure which, General Fogarty.
General Wood, thank you for that very kind introduction. General Shea, my Ranger buddy, and that's how I describe the CIO G6 of the Army, because the bottom line is we just spent about an hour together We don't probably spend as much time as we need to together, which would be every waking moment. I think my wife would be jealous if she thought that when I wake up in the middle of the night, that's who I'm thinking of, is Bruce Crawford. And I think that actually should illustrate how our fates are all intertwined. And what has happened is we've moved, I think, from this team of rivals to mission partners. And I want to thank Jen Buckner. She's the one who coined that term, which I've shamelessly used, and it's actually been published. But it was really this big idea that we bring the tribes together for the good of the Army, the good of the Joint Force. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, and I hope you'll find this interesting. So as we talk convergence, that was literally saying, you know what, we need to break down stovepipes. We need to ensure that offense, defense, cyber, intel, signal, electronic warfare, fires, information operations, space, all of which are kind of out on their own in some respects, that we're able to actually bring them together and be able to provide combat commanders at either the Army or the Joint Force level the ability to do principally two things. One is see the adversary, the second is see themselves. And if they can accomplish both of those, then that allows them hopefully to make optimal decisions. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about the importance of speed. But the way we were configured, the way we were organized, the way we kind of had our tribal boundaries, it was almost impossible to be able to do that. We could do it faster than the current adversary, which frankly at that time was Taliban. It was remnants of some of the insurgent groups, to include Shia insurgent groups in Iraq. But what has happened is we saw how ISIS came on the scene very rapidly. And part of their power was their ability to hit a global audience, be able to inspire recruits, be able to make themselves look much larger than they were. And this was an instance where they used social media, they used cyber to really promote their IO message. And that was an important part of their toolkit. And actually, as we have had much success on the physical caliphate, I think that what we're going to see is them attempt to resurge in that virtual caliphate, where if you're sitting overseas, you don't necessarily know, first of all, you don't believe anything you're seeing from the Western press. And so they can hit people that are predisposed, they have a bias against Western press, and what they're able to do is actually take that narrative, and as long as they can keep that alive, as long as they can effectively promote that, then frankly, our kinetic effects in theater will not be able to completely destroy them. They can keep the idea alive. And so what I'm going to talk about today, I think, are a couple of ideas. And as we move from convergence to being able to bring the electronic warfare community into the cyber community, as I told that functional area 29, I said, look, I don't really care about your functional area. What I care about is the capability. And I will do anything required to keep the capability alive. And so we made some hard decisions. And we had to bring, I thought, which was what was going to be required to get the EW community prepared to operate in this new environment that I'll describe in a few minutes. We had to bring them into the cyber tribe in a way they hadn't previously. And what we found is kind of a funny thing's happened is now the Intel tribe wants to adopt the electronic warfare tribe. And so they're actually in a pretty good position, I think, as we start to look forward. But we told General Perkins at the time, who was my boss at TRADOC, that this was the first step. And frankly, it was a necessary first step, was to actually keep the EW capability in the Army. We jumped to, frankly, where we were, the capability that we were in danger of losing. And so we kind of waited. And we waited to bring in the IO community. And so that's the next part of this, because as I'll sketch out here, I think we're at the point now where Army Cyber Command, that was probably the appropriate term on 21 May of 2010 when General Alexander stood up Cyber Command, and about a month later when General Hernandez stood up Army Cyber. I think we're well past that now. And I think we're at a point where in the future, it's going to change to something like this: Army Information Warfare Operations Command, or Army Information Dominance Command. And I think you're going to see the same thing up at Fort Meade with Cyber Command. At least that's what I will advise. Because what I've really tried to do is distill the lessons we've learned from operating in the cyber domain alongside those that are operating in the information environment. And what I've come to believe is that, frankly, the overlap is much deeper, it's much greater than just kind of these bumps in the night. And that's the next stage of this, is actually bringing all this together. And yes, it is integrate these capabilities, integrate the domain and the information environment, because what I've come to believe and observe is that our adversaries are doing exactly that. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. I'm going to head to the whiteboard real quickly. I'm surprised it lasted this long. And I don't know if you can see this, but this is the framework that I'm using now, which is this idea of sense, understand, decide, act, and then either assess or evaluate depending exactly what the task is. Now, a colleague of all of ours, Sidney Freeberg, he really he cut straight to my heart. He wrote an article about a month ago, and he said, hey, this is really like a poor man's version of OODA loop. And I actually took great offense at that. And I'm gonna talk you through why I think this is significantly different. And I think this is the framework we've got to start taking a look at. This may not be the ultimate framework, and as I generally say, if you don't like it, then there's a black pen up here or a red pen. You can come up on the stage, you can write what you think it should be. I'm okay with that. But the bottom line is, this is tough business. And it's not just the intel or the recce squadron's business. It's not aerial ISR. It's not ground ISR. It's our ability in all operational domains to be able to place a full range of sensors, and with that goes a complete planning cycle, because you have to understand what it is you need to feed your decision-making process. And sometimes we'll refer to it as CCIR or PIR or FFIR, but the bottom line is, if you don't have sensors on it, you are going to miss it. In many cases, those sensors are going to require persistent surveillance. Another way of saying this that will resonate with our intel community is PED. You have to be able to process, right? You have to be able to exploit, you have to be able to disseminate, and you have to be able to do this in real time. Because I think where we're at right now is whoever can do this faster than their adversary, they enjoy decisive advantage. It doesn't matter if you're the commander on an Abrams tank, or a Bradley, or an Apache helicopter, or you're a cyber defender, or you're a commander sitting at your TOC, wherever it's going to be distributed on the battlefield. If your adversary can do this faster than you, you've lost. And that's going to put incredible pressure on industry, because you're going to have to help us solve this problem. So we'll talk about big data, or we talk about it, we throw it around. We talk about AI. AI has become almost the new CT or the new cloud, right? We have a lot of people that are throwing it around, and they really don't know what they're talking about, and I'm not an expert either. And that's the other thing we've got to do is we've got to get experts. It can't be someone who knows more than I do. That's not an expert. If I know more than the chief, we're in deep trouble because I'm not the expert. So we're going to have to reach out to you for your assistance. And that comes from academia and our industry partners because we've got to solve this. So I've got to be able to sense what's going on in the environment. In this case, it cannot be limited to just a cyber environment. I have to understand what's going on, or in the cyber domain. I have to be able to understand what's going on in the information environment. Then I have to create understanding. So this is very different than situational awareness. I've got to be able to create understanding. And I've got to be able to tell you that as a commander, what's required to feed me, what my framework is, and that's how you're going to array your sensors. And then what I have to be able to do is decide, and we can generally do that fairly rapidly. I've always been impressed with our commanders. But here's our challenge, is to be able to act, because we have become enamored with process. And I think it takes us far too long to act on what we're seeing, what we understand, what we decide, and then what we implement. And it doesn't matter where it's at. So if we have a bad sensor plan, we're going to delay the ability to create understanding, or we're going to create understanding, frankly, that is wrong. And then it really probably doesn't matter what our decision is. But right now, we're in a race. And we're in a race with pretty sophisticated adversaries. And so this notion of speed is very important. So I'll give you an example on the defensive side. So Mandiant they publish a report every year. It's called M-Trends. It's a retrospective look from the year before. I commend it to you. I get it every year. I can't wait, actually, to read it. My wife doesn't understand that either, but that's why I'm waiting for every night until that comes in. And what it does, it looks across the industry. And it shows trends. So there's some longitudinal data there that I think is very important. And so the good news is if you're a cyber defender, raise your hand. Okay, excellent. So you're doing a better job. You did it in 2017 than you did the year before. Because in 2016, it took you about 150 days to detect an intrusion in your network. And so now we're down to about 97 days. So good on you. But this is the problem. The adversary is becoming more capable, more aggressive. And how long does it take him, once he's able to get into your network through a variety of means, spear phishing is one of the most common, how long do you think it takes him to own your network? About 3 days on average. So if you can't detect him for 97 days, and it only takes him 3 days to own your network, you're at a significant disadvantage. And so they're very motivated to get in because that's where your IP, think money, that's where your plans are, think success. And so they're very motivated to get in there, just as motivated as we are on the offensive side. And so we have the tension between the offense and the defense, and it goes something like this. If I'm a defender, I have supreme confidence that my defense in depth strategy will enable me to defeat you. And if I'm on the offense, I have absolute supreme confidence that I will be able to penetrate your defense. And I will get your crown jewels. And then I'll do with that what I want. And so we've got to ensure that the defense and the offense are tipping and cueing each other, and they've got to be able to do it in real time. And what we're finding as we're starting to work this, and JFHQ Doden is leading this effort for the department right now, is that the activity on the network is telling a story all of itself. And we've got to be able to close the intel collection And that data that's coming from operating on the network, and we've got to be able to accomplish this in real time. Now, I'll say the same thing as we look at operations. How long did it take us to understand what the Russians did in 2016 to the elections? What I will tell you is they were moving a lot faster than we were. We were occupied on an adversary by the name of ISIS. And the Russians were focused on an adversary called the United States of America. And we were operating the cyber domain, both sides. We were linking up with I.O. We were using a little EW. They didn't have to. And we both created effects. But in this case, we were much slower, I believe, to sense, understand, decide, and act. And we cannot afford to place ourselves in that position in the future, I don't believe. And so we've seen an adversary that is very agile, very capable, very fast. And that's a state actor. And I predict we're going to see more and more of that, and we're going to have to tune our game. And we're going to have to get much, much faster. We've got to put our sensors out in the right place. That's going to be critical. Now, we held a senior leadership conference for the command 2 weeks ago, and Tom Friedman came in and gave us really 2 hours of his time. He was incredibly generous. And he really talked about his last book, and he talked about really kind of the three big ideas in that book, which is this acceleration of technology, this acceleration of climate, okay, this acceleration really of the market, and how it's moving faster than many of us can understand it. And he picks 2007 as an inflection point. Because 2007, what did we see? We saw the deployment of the first iPhone. We saw deployment of the Android operating system and the first Android devices. So that was a competitor market that drove that. But nonetheless, I mean, can you imagine? Deployment of the Kindle. Just as importantly, we saw deployment of GitHub, of Facebook, Amazon Web Services. And so you had this technological revolution that started to outpace our ability to understand and actually deploy it coherently. Now, what else happened in 2007? Well, the Russians attacked a country by the name of Estonia, which was the most wired country in the world. And they were able to wreak havoc. And they did it very, very rapidly. And they followed with Lithuania the following year, with Kyrgyzstan, with Georgia. And in Georgia, it was a combination of kinetic and non-kinetic activities. And they didn't get it just right, but this is what makes them extraordinarily dangerous. They're learning adaptive military. And so they took lessons learned. And I'll tell you, when they rolled into Crimea in February of 2016, it was not a repeat of what happened in Georgia. And as we've watched them operate in that region, we've seen them actually synchronize, probably not integrate, but synchronize all aspects of information warfare. So it's intelligence, it's military deception, psychological operations, information operations, cyber, electronic warfare. And they've been able to link that to a very capable fires complex. And so they understand how important it is to control space. And they can do that on the ground by denying their adversary the ability to use GPS while they preserve their capability to do that. They're able to take information, intelligence gleaned from social media scraping and use that. They're able to do the full range of capabilities that are required to bring all this together. And they don't require a multi-billion-dollar program of record to do it. So they understand what our secret sauce is. And I think it is that network and the data that resides on it, and the weapon systems that leverage it. And so that's our foundational weapon system. And so they understand the capability that provides. That's one of the lessons they've learned as they've watched us operate from 1991 until the present. And so what they've developed is a strategy to attack it. And the reason I think it is so important to them is because they've made the investment and the capabilities to actually attack our ability to use it. And this is what they want to interrupt, is our ability to accomplish this in all aspects of operations. So, in the cyber domain, like every other operational domain, we're driven by intelligence. And it's given us good insights to what our adversaries, how they view us, how they plan to fight us. And so at Army Cyber, I have 3 relatively straightforward missions. I conduct cyber operations for the Army, I conduct electronic warfare operations for the Army, and I conduct information operations for the Army. And so we've spent a lot of time in the last 4 years or so on cyber and electronic warfare. And we're going to spend the next 4 years building on those gains and making the proper investment in information operations and military deception and the other information-related capabilities. Because if I'm going to be able to meet my requirement, which is to provide my commanders freedom of action in all domains, not just the cyber domains, all domains and in the information environment where he's being attacked, and being able to deny the same to the adversary, if I can't enable our commanders the ability to do this very simple thing, thank you, Mr. Freeberg, it is very simple, then I think I have failed as the Army Cyber Commander. And as I started, I can't do this by myself. So it requires some unnatural acts, because what I'm asking the tribes to do is actually come together. And I don't have to own you. I just have to be able to integrate with you, because that's what our commanders and our forces that are operating in a very complex operating environment require to be successful. And the ability to be able to understand real time what my sensor network, my sensor plan is actually producing, to allow my commander to create understanding so he can decide and act faster than the adversary, and then be able to assess and evaluate, because if we don't get it right, we have to restrike. So think kinetically, you have to restrike. You know, our defenses, they didn't work as we planned. I've got to be able to see that real time and make adjustments real time. And so that's a very challenging task. And we're not going to create all that within the uniformed services. So that's where I need your support. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to open up for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, sir. My name's John. I'll be asking the questions from back here. Just understand the questions are coming in via email. And if you have a question to ask out in the audience, the email is on the screen. Sir, the first question, Can you focus your thoughts on multi-domain operations and suggest where industry can help?
Yeah, so I think actually a very very capable speaker before me, General Martin, today, and his experience both at NTC as a division commander and then now the positions he in. I don't want to reiterate what he said, but this is the environment we're in right now. So this multi-domain operations, that's not in the future. That's where we're at today. So what I really require from industry is the ability to pull together data very rapidly. I didn't talk about part of the requirement for speed is autonomous, to drive autonomous action. So if you think about a main battle tank, trundling down the road, and it could face a threat from an RPG or an anti-tank guided missile, an ATGM, and so some of these things you can't outrun. And we have adversaries and we have partners that actually have a vehicle or systems on their vehicles, these active protection systems, that can detect, they can sense, they autonomously understand what the threat is and where it's at. They can decide and act in a millisecond, because that's about what it takes to shoot the arrow, because that's essentially what we're doing. We're shooting the arrow. And so if you think about at the base level, the importance of industry to creating those types of solutions. The counter-IED threat was something that required an autonomous response. We didn't want the operator driving down the road and he gets a heads-up display and he has this readout, and then he gets a menu of options on his FBCB2, and he says, as I'm driving 70 miles per hour down the road, wow, I wonder which one of these I'll select. Okay, he's already hit the ID by that point. So that's where we've got to be in this world. So it's real-time display, and then it's going to require real-time decisions and action. And I think a lot of what we have, a lot of touch labor doing today, you've got to help us get out of that business. Because what I really want to do is automate those basic level tasks. I want my workforce focused on those higher order tasks. Those things that's going to be very difficult for AI to come up with that exquisite solution for.
Okay, sir, thank you. Next question. Do you see information operations becoming the next warfighter function for the Army?
Well, I think that decision's been made or is close to being made. I'm less worried about how we categorize it than I am at being able to integrate it and start employing it. And so if you think about it, that's what we did with EW. I was less concerned about the titles and the functional areas and all that than let's get the capability out. And so we went as part of a small team to the Ukraine. We've been reading, talking to Mike Carver on what he was looking at. The asymmetric warfare group was starting to get visit, talk to the Ukrainians. We went over on a visit and talked to those guys. And what we recognize is electronic warfare was not some passing fad, that it was essential. And it was really interesting as we talked to the EW community. We had trained them very well because that's what they were focused on, was counter-IED. And we said, look, the biggest killer of the battlefield in the Donbass is indirect fire, followed by direct fire. IEDs aren't even on the radar screen. Matter of fact, they get confused when you talk to them about IEDs. What is this IED thing you're talking about, right? And we need something for the things that are killing us. And one of the things that was helping the Russians kill Ukrainians was use of UAS. And so you had these sensors, and it wasn't the only thing, but you had these sensors that were out there, and they were able to shoot very, very quickly. Because they weren't using the same, trust me, they were not using the same rules of engagement we were. And so for them, part of their theory was, shock. So you just had to get it right enough. And there was effect to putting a kind of a kilometer square area being saturated by DPICM. And so that became a problem. So I think for I/O, and we would have still been arguing, John, we would have still been arguing about definitions, functions, and all that. We know what we got to do with I/O. We just got to get on with it. And I think as we integrate it and we start to employ it, integrate it and employ it much more effectively than we've done today, then what you're going to see is you're going to see people lining up to help, which is what we're seeing on the EW side. It's gotten a lot of attention. It's gotten a lot of support because people are understanding the capability that it provides.
All right, sir, thank you. Next question. How would you characterize the electromagnetic spectrum? Is it an environment, a domain, or something else?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with, it is not a domain. Period. We had that discussion actually a couple years ago. We don't need an additional domain, I don't think, to understand. So I think it is an environment. And I'll tell you, in the cyber domain, I live and die to a great extent by what's happening in the electromagnetic spectrum. So it could be Wi-Fi, it could be Bluetooth, it could be a lot of other different ways. And so I've got a menu of capabilities, right? I can use RF energy to deny or disrupt, degrade the adversary's ability to use that capability. I can also use this very exquisite cyber capability. It just depends on what works best for that situation. So I don't want to bind myself. I want the full range of capabilities. And if you start to look at our allies, our partners, they look at this a little differently than we do. Where they place it is different in many of the countries that we partner with. So definitely not a domain. I think it's more of an environment. I'm not sure, again, that's important as it is to get it in, integrate it, and look at it very holistically. And I think we're at a point now where, again, we want it to be very autonomous. If you think about where we were at with CID equipment, it could sense the environment as it was moving down the road. It's reporting what it's sensing. It detects that signal, and it takes that signal out. So it was much different the day of broadband jamming where we were taking everything out. Because this is the other big idea, and it was really what drove us to working on EW first, is that the three tribes that use or live in the electromagnetic spectrum the most are the intel guys, because they're doing collection on the adversary. The friendly guys, because they're doing mission command. I mean, that's where you're getting your fire support from. It's where you're getting your mission command from. And then the EW guys. And so we're at a point where, one of the most developed nations on Earth, when we had to deconflict, everybody was using a different planning tool, and you brought a spreadsheet and a PowerPoint slide, and you laid it out on the TOC. And you're kind of getting it about right. And so the problem was, we talk about a congested operating space, much of the fratricide was in the spectrum. And so I'll carve out some roles. The SIGO, the signal community, they're the ones that manage the electromagnetic spectrum. Is there any pushback from the signal community? But they do it in partnership with the guys who are collecting in it and the guys that are going to create effects in it. And what we want to be able to do is, as we're bouncing down the road, is be able to collect, implement mission command, and be able to attack threats and do all that simultaneously and seamlessly. I think we can do that, and that's what we're working toward.
All right, sir, thank you. This is the final question. Okay. What are your specific or short-term plans to help improve the speed in the SUDA loop you described earlier?
In the what I described?
The sense, understand, decide, and act loop, the SUDA loop.
Yeah, I forgot to do this, right? I'm gonna copyright it, okay? So if you're taking the any previous versions are no longer. So if you write the book, I'm gonna get my share, right? No, here's what we're working right now. As you think about on the cyber side specifically, we're working with Cyber Command to make sure we got the requirement right for a unified platform. We think that's critically important because the services have been directed, and we're all moving out very smartly to build the infrastructure we require, the tools that were required. In 19, we pick up the training requirement for the cyber force. But what we got to make sure we don't come up with are multiple ways of handling data, of tagging data, and what we end up doing is we create these internal stovepipes, these data dumps, essentially, that you can't get access to. So there's a lot of work on defining exactly, matter of fact, we met yesterday to define and narrow down what unified platform is, and very importantly, as Mr. Pontius has sagely advised, what it isn't, so we can scope it appropriately. And so we think we're going to see, based on really a big data platform that the Army is operating with right now, Gabriel Nimbus, we think that we're kind of leading the way right now. Now, the other services could have different thoughts on that, but that's a specific thing that we're trying to work to get to this. When you look at the EW side, it's the deployment of EW PMT to allow us to automate, to allow us to do the planning much faster and much more effectively than we currently do. I think the one gap, and John, I think the one gap right now is being able to provide a dashboard for friendly commanders to see themselves, their own signature in the electromagnetic spectrum. On the intel side, we do a pretty good job of being able to track the adversary. That's our bread and butter. So we can provide, in some cases, a real-time view of the adversary in the spectrum that we can't do for ourselves. And I think that role probably, with support from the EW community and the intel community, really on tradecraft, TTPs, I think that's probably a signal responsibility. But really what I want to be able to do is the commander to be able to see where the adversary is operating, what he looks like, how he's moving. Then through the filter of understanding of what the adversary, what their capability is to collect and their ability to exploit the collection, is be able to explain to him in real time so he can see it. He can actually see it, what he looks like, so he can maneuver his network, fight his network, fight in the electromagnetic spectrum, and he can do that in real time. Because today, what happens, he looks at the bubblegum chart. It just tells you if certain data's flowing, something's up or something's down. Against the Taliban, that might be good enough. Against some of the adversaries we talked about this afternoon, that doesn't even come close to what's required. And what I don't want to do is spend a lot of time, remember time, speed, trying to describe something when he should be able to look at it, overlay with the adversary and say, you know what, that Q-36, that's essential to my counterfire plan. I just noticed that thing's been operating, it's been radiating for a couple hours now. The adversary we're facing in this particular scenario has the ability to geolocate that. I better turn that sucker off and move it. We're very fortunate it hasn't been hit yet. And so we're going to have to maneuver down to that level. Now, I'm not talking about division commanders should be doing that, but the Divardi commander, whoever the commander is responsible for that capability, has got to be able to see that. He's got to be able to see it in real time. That's where we got to get. And so we're working our way through that. I think EWPMT becomes a first step toward that. But those are some of the things that we're working very hard right now. And the hook is here. Thank you very much.
That was our final question from General Fogarty. Please welcome back Lieutenant General Bob Wood back to the stage to formally thank him on behalf of AFCEA and our audience. Sir?
Well, listen, don't, where are you going with it? I'll tell you, it's gone. It's copyrighted. Don't forget now. General Fogarty, thank you so much for presenting the unified field theory of cyber. I'll copyright that, whatever. No, it really is helpful to have a picture of You know, sometimes simplicity is remarkably complex. And I think taking advantage of that idea of the picture and the approach and really the perspective of a cyber warrior offers a lot of various areas in which I think corporations can add fidelity to the understanding, to the sensing, the ability to act. That's not an OODA loop, or even a SUDA loop, but it really is the assess, evaluate, and assess is a very important part of it. Thank you very much, General Fogarty. On behalf of this and your presentation, we'll make a presentation to Fisher House. What I'd like to do is, at this point, ladies and gentlemen, hold for a minute, because we've got a couple of special presentations I'd like to, if you'd indulge us with. I would like to first call to the stage Tina Jordan, AFCEA's Vice President for Membership, and we have two presentations we're going to make. Tina? Tina, are you here? Okay. The presentations will not be made at this point. All right, we'll just observe, orient, and act here is what I'm going to say. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you what's on for the rest of the afternoon. We invite you to yet another networking break in the exhibit area, and that's good. We went slightly long, but I wanted to make sure General Fogarty had the ability to talk through his programs and his vision. The program content wraps up tonight. We have a remarkable presentation after that, a reception, the exhibit floor, sponsored by Logarithm. Appreciate that, allowing for interaction with your peers. At 3 o'clock, in a little bit, we'll have sessions in all of the classrooms along the Riverwalk, all of them in the back center there. We have an AFCEA Augusta Fort Gordon chapter course being presented, a session on DISA services, and the first session from Track 2, integrating EW cyber and SIGINT requirements. There's also a very interesting engagement theater session on EMP and its effects starting at 3 o'clock on the exhibit floor in the engagement theater. Thank you to Broadleaf for their support of the engagement theater throughout. Our industry experts will present the first batch of solution reviews. They'll be ongoing. Take a look at that. Those solution reviews are those 11 problem statements were selected to take a look at the solutions being presented by industry. We received 46 submissions. The top 11 are being presented this week. We'll get started tomorrow, by the way, at 7 o'clock. Last time I'll see you, so let me orient you about tomorrow. 7 o'clock with coffee, generously provided by Unisys. And 8 o'clock, we'll continue to present solution reviews concurrently in Estes A and B, Estes A and B, the rooms back on the Riverwalk. There's also a second session of Track 1, cyberspace capabilities in support of unified land operations. We'll reconvene in here at 9:15 with a keynote presentation from Lieutenant General Bruce Crawford, the Army Chief Information Officer, G6, Battle Buddy. Thank you for being with us. I think we'll tie these two subjects wonderfully together. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the afternoon and evening. Hope to see you down on the exhibit floor. Thank you for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you for attending the afternoon's keynote address. Please remember that many of today's breakout sessions have been approved for continuing education. Consult the conference app for your latest list of sessions. As a reminder, documentation of your attendance at these sessions is a benefit of being an AFCEA member. If you're not a member, you can sign up for membership at the special discounted on-site rate at booth 123. Enjoy your afternoon and evening. Thank you very much.